All right. Hi, everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about 3 reasons why you don't want to just put Band-Aids on your symptoms and just kind of suppress the symptoms and make them go away, and why it's so important to get to the root cause and the underlying cause of what's going on for you. So, I think our immediate reaction or response to try and figure out to try and relieve our symptoms is really, how do I get rid of this symptom as quickly as possible? And those things can be really useful. They can be really helpful in helping you feel better, help your mind clear, um, and really just kind of providing that immediate relief. But today I want to talk about why it's so important to dive deeper and really figure out what's going on underneath, what the root causes of your food sensitivities are, the root causes of your digestive symptoms, your discomfort, and all these things that you're dealing with. So, um, let's jump into that. Let's go ahead and talk about why it is so important and what can happen if you are just kind of slapping band-aids on and suppressing the symptoms and not diving deeper. So, both things can happen. It's just when we take a supplement or a medication or, continue to take one food out after another, we are helping to relieve the symptoms in the short term, but we need to do that deeper work and really figure out what's going on for you. Otherwise, whatever's happening underneath is going to continue to percolate and progress, right? That issue isn't just going to go away until you address it, and really you have to identify it to be able to address it. So let's talk about these 3 reasons. The first reason why it's so important to not just slap those band-aids on and neglect diving deeper and really figuring out what's going on is that your symptoms are going to spring back up. So I relate to this so much because I went in circles for years trying to figure out what was going on for me. And I got into this cycle of taking all these supplements and continuously removing foods. And, I just had to remove one food after another, after another, after another. But my symptoms, they would ease for a while and then things would spring back up. And at one point, I was worse than really even where I started because I was eating other things to compensate for these foods I was taking out that also weren't serving me. But I wasn't tuning into that these healthy foods were also causing issues. So I can really relate to this because I was on that wheel for years, and you don't have to stay stuck on that wheel for years. As you find a supplement that works for you, or you take out a food and you have relief, that's a great time to dive deeper and try and figure out, what's underneath this. Like, let's look at all the foods I have out and figure out what the common patterns are. Let's look at what's going on in my gut that could maybe be triggering, or in my house, or, with stress that can be triggering these symptoms to continuously appear, and the damage, my body not to heal, but the damage really to continue to get worse. So that's the second reason. So one is that your symptoms will spring back up over and over again. They're not just going to go away until the underlying cause is addressed. And so you may find relief in the short term, but then things are going to spring back up as long as you still have those underlying things happening in your body. The second thing is that this damage that is happening in your gut, in your digestive system, will continue until you get to that underlying cause. So things can get worse, right? If you're struggling with leaky gut and things are getting into your bloodstream, that can get worse. If you're struggling with microbial imbalance, until we get to the underlying cause, you don't really come back to a good place of balance. So you can supplement with probiotics to kind of fill those holes, but it's not going to change your those probiotics don't become part of your microbiome, and they won't change it long term. So that doesn't mean there's not a purpose for them. It doesn't mean that there is not a reason why you're taking probiotics, and that they don't serve a good purpose. They do, but they kind of serve as like a placeholder, and can help us in that when they're in the system, they can help us kind of break things down a little bit better. Same for digestive enzymes. Digestive enzymes can help you break food down, but what we need to figure out is what is stopping your body from producing those enzymes itself, right? What is the cause beneath why you don't have enough enzymes to break your food down in the first place? What is the reason that your microbial balance is so off? So, as we dive a little deeper into those things, and it doesn't have to be big, complicated things. For most people with digestive issues, we can look at really basic things to support this, and really basic things that can be the underlying causes, right? Food, different things in our lifestyle, different things in our environment. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. But before I go into that, I just want to say that the third reason is that you can develop more food sensitivities. So I also relate to this because that's what happened with me. So I continuously was taking foods out, but then I was becoming sensitive to the foods I was eating a lot of. So, at one point I was feeling sensitive to eggs because I ate 2 eggs for breakfast every morning. At one point, I became sensitive to things like nuts and seeds and stuff like that. I was really loading up on those things. And so the foods that you're commonly eating often are the ones that we become sensitive to, because that when you have that underlying dysfunction in your gut, the leaky intestinal lining, things get into the bloodstream and then your immune system responds. And that's one way we can become sensitive to more foods. So, really good to know that and to think about that as you're changing foods in your diet, and really working with your digestive health and your gut health, that as long as those underlying causes are not being addressed, things can continue to get worse. And even if they seem to be better for a while, they can progress. So when you find that relief and you figure out the foods that are triggering you, then you can kind of take a little bit of a deeper look and say, okay, what's going on? I have 10 foods that I know I'm sensitive to. Or for some people, it's 25 or 30, or maybe there's only 10 foods they can eat. Like it can get really intense with how many things you have to pull out of your diet. And so that is valuable, to take those things out and let the system heal by addressing the underlying, the whatever's causing the lining to be leaky, whatever's causing the microbial balance, whatever's causing the dysfunction with the gut brain connection, those things, addressing those things. And we can address a lot of that through food, like I said before. So let me talk about that a little bit, because sometimes the underlying causes are inflammatory foods that are unidentified. So if you're taking foods out of your diet and you feel better, but you've still got symptoms, there's still something triggering you. There's still something inflaming you and causing that ongoing inflammation that creates this dysfunction. It creates this leaking in the gut, or it creates the microbial balances. It creates dysfunction with the vagus nerve, that gut-brain connection. All these things are triggered by something initially, right? And so no matter where you're at, the first thing I would say to do to dive deeper is take a really good look at what's serving you and what's not, what foods are working for you and what's not. And then second to that, and I don't even know if it's second, on par with that is looking at your stress, because stress will create these things, right? So if you're eating amazing, you're eating all these foods that you think are really healthy for your body, and you've really made a lot of diet changes, but you've got chronic stress in your life, that can be continuously feeding into that dysfunction. So it can directly impact the gut lining. It can directly impact the good and bad bacteria in the gut, and it can directly impact the vagus nerve. And so we get into this cycle where those things become more and more dysfunctional, and then they continue to feed into the cycle. So looking at these things and figuring out what is serving you and what is not is the first place to start for any sort of digestive health related issues. So if you think you have food sensitivities, or you have food sensitivities, and you know you've got something going on with your digestion, figuring those two things out are first and foremost the things that are going to help the most. And getting to a point where you feel good, where you know what foods build you up and give you energy, where you know what foods trigger your symptoms, and where you can really kind of tease out with how, with stress, how to find a good balance around that, with self-care and stress management techniques and minimizing stress. I think there's a lot of stress in the world, but we also create a lot of stress in our lives by hyper focusing on things. And again, super guilty. Like, I can relate to this so much because I've done that for years. And it's not that I never do that anymore, right? Our brains are super complex and complicated, and anxiety is something I've struggled with. But I do know when I put these two things together, when I put together figuring out the foods that were really serving me, and then also looking at my stress level, those two things together can make such a massive difference. So no matter what's going on for you, or whether you found a couple supplements that help, unless those supplements are really um, designed to help you produce the things that you need to digest your food, or unless they're designed to really fix the underlying function, and not many of them are, right? We can replace with digestive enzymes, we can replace with hydrochloric acid, or things that build up our stomach acid, but unless they're instigating the mechanism in your gut that produces those things, and unless they're really getting to the root cause of what's going on, it's not going to fix the problem. So I can't emphasize that enough. And I feel so passionate about communicating this because for so long I just went in circles, not getting it, not understanding why I couldn't get better and why I was having to work so hard. And if you can get to the root cause sooner than later, wherever you are on your journey, the sooner you get there, the sooner your gut can begin to heal. And then you can start to really not only feel better, but eventually a lot of people add foods back in. You've got to get to those underlying causes to get to that point, right? And then it takes time. It takes time for the gut to heal, but eventually I do see people expand their diet and add things back in, whether it's fully or in moderation, that they used to not be able to eat, they used to not be able to digest or tolerate. So there's so much hope in that, and the sooner you can get to the underlying causes, the better. So I want to talk about a couple of other areas that you can dive deeper into. So like if you have figured out looking at the foods and really know what foods serve you, what foods make you feel really good, and what foods create stress, what foods trigger your symptoms, and they do provide stress on the gut, but really also looking at your stress and your lifestyle. Another area that's super important is looking into the toxins in your environment. So if you feel like you've addressed those other things, and I have to say I had to go through that process probably at least 4 times, maybe more, of really eliminating and challenging. And over the years, I found more and more things. Because here's the other thing is, if you're still having symptoms, but you're trying to test foods and you've eliminated them and tried to challenge them in your diet, but you're still experiencing symptoms, it is really hard to tease out if that food is actually causing a physical reaction, or increased mental symptoms, mental health symptoms with like anxiety or depression or irritability or mood, because you've already got these things in your body where the inflammation is already there. When you can find that clear baseline, it makes such a difference. But so I was going to say, if you've already feel like you've kind of addressed those areas and that you're really working hard at stress management, looking at your environment is huge. And I would say this is huge anyway, but it's necessary for people who just are not finding relief, but you're doing so many things and working so hard. Looking at the things in your environment, what's in your water, how do you get to drinking clean water, a really good filter, not just a Brita pitcher, but like a good filter. There are so many toxins in city water. And if you're on well water, there's kind of a different bag of worms, right? So there's other things in that to consider. And And then looking at the things in your air, and this can be everything from your furniture is off gassing, especially if it's new, to mold toxins, to dust in the air that just really trap bacteria and fungi and different things that just build up in our bodies. We are living in such an indoor world these days, getting outside and getting fresh air, and there's so many things that can be inexpensive to do, as well as, some higher tech things. It can also happen that can make a big difference, but there are things that you can do that are free and pretty easy, but it's incorporating them into your lifestyle. Also looking at EMFs in your environment, and all of the signals and radiation that's coming from our wireless and our cell phones and things like that. There's quite a few areas, and I've got some other videos on environmental toxins if you're interested in that. And this is something that I help guide people through too, because we've went through the process extensively in our own lives, and now we've moved and are incorporating it in our place here as well. So one last thing to mention, as far as diving deeper, is if you are still not finding relief and you've done these lifestyle things and, made some lifestyle shifts and really feel like you've maxed out on some other options, exploring with some sort of practitioner what pathogens might be in your gut. So I just want to say before that I put that last, because as you look at what foods are serving you, which needs to happen anyway, as you look at your stress, which needs to happen anyway, and as you look at your environmental toxins, which I really believe needs to happen as well, I would say do those things first and then move on to, if you're still struggling, let's look at what pathogens, what pathogenic bacteria, viruses, parasites, and fungal overgrowth and things like that are happening in your body. And you may need to go through some steps to kind of minimize those to get things back into balance. But I will say that our bodies are always trying to come back to homeostasis. They're always trying to repair. So as you clean up the environment in your body, a lot of those pathogens will take care of themselves. And on the flip side, if you come in and you just start to treat and kill off pathogenic microbes, and first of all, you need a practitioner to go through that process for sure, because there can be die-off and there can be different things that happen. And, if you're going to go into that, it's good to do the testing and things like that around it. But if you start to get rid of those things, but you are still eating inflammatory foods and you're still living living in a state of chronic stress, and your environment is super toxic and you haven't addressed any of those things, so often those are the things that have caused these issues to begin with. And if the environment in your gut is not conducive to the good bacteria thriving and the pathogenic bacteria not surviving, then you're going to end up right back where you were, right? And I've also been through that process where I've treated for those microbes, but I still hadn't gotten to these primary underlying causes, and I was still struggling. So just want to bring some light to that today, and give a little bit of encouragement that it is possible to feel better, and the sooner you get to these underlying causes versus just slapping on Band-Aids, replacing things with supplements. So many people that I speak with also are using over-the-counter medications on an ongoing basis, which can provide relief short term, but also those kind of things. As we know, all medications and over-the-counter medications have side effects, and also they're not treating the underlying cause. So things continue to get worse, and sometimes they can make things worse as well, despite the providing temporary relief for what's going on. They at times can feed into the problem. So things like antacids and if you're using laxatives and things like that, those can be really problematic later. Different medications can really feed into what's going on in your gut. So don't just stop those cold turkey. Check in with your practitioner. Make sure that you do that in a really responsible way, because a lot of those things, even if they're over the counter, need to be kind of weaned off. So check in with someone and have your doctor or your primary care practitioner help you with that. But just know that getting to the underlying causes, the medications or whatever it is, can serve that purpose to help you with, whatever it's meant for, but then you need to address these underlying causes no matter what. So I hope that's really helpful for you. And if you want to explore this more, I offer a free coaching session, and I'd be happy to dive into what's going on for you, what you're really struggling with, what you want to create, how you want to feel, and really help you kind of come up with a plan to get from point A to point B. Because until you kind of go through this process and look at your foods, your stress, your environment, and really clean those things up and look at what's serving you and what's not, things can continue to progress and get worse and develop new food sensitivities and all those kind of things. So I'll put the link to my calendar in the description above this video. If you're interested in a free coaching session, click on that link, sign up for a spot, claim a spot that works for you. If you don't see something that works for you, send me an email. My email's on that page as well. And we'll find a time that works for you and help you get started digging into what might be underlying and really triggering, what might really be at the root of your symptoms and your food sensitivities. So, so possible to get past it, so possible to find relief. And I see people do that all the time. So I know that it can happen, and I want that for you. So, I will wrap up there. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.